When 9-year-old Tommy stepped onto that Liverpool talent show stage in 1963 and began singing Love Me Do, the audience started booing and laughing at his trembling voice, but they had no idea the Beatles themselves were watching from backstage. What happened next transformed a moment of childhood humiliation into one of the most legendary acts of kindness in music history, creating a story that would be whispered about for decades. But what did the Beatles actually do when they saw this little boy's dream being crushed right in front of their eyes? The backstage area of St. Paul, Mary's Community Centre, reeks of old cigarettes and nervous sweat. Dust particles dance in the amber light filtering through cracked windows as children in their Sunday best pace between makeshift dressing areas. The year is 1963, and Liverpool pulses with a new kind of energy, one that 4 lads from the Cavern Club helped create. Behind a stack of folding chairs, the familiar silhouettes huddle in the shadows. John Lennon adjusts his leather jacket, squinting through his glasses at the chaos before them. They've slipped in through the back door, desperate for a moment of normalcy before tomorrow's grueling recording session. No screaming fans, no flashbulbs, just pure, unfiltered talent in its rawest form. "Christ, look at them," John whispers, nodding toward the young performers. "Remember when we were that terrified?" Paul McCartney's expression softens as he watches a group of girls rehearse harmonies, their vocals wavering with nerves and hope. George Harrison leans against the wall, picking silently at an imaginary guitar, while Ringo taps out rhythms on his knee. They're famous now, #1 on the charts, but in this cramped, chaotic space, they're just young lads watching dreams unfold. The community centre's ancient radiators clang and hiss, creating a percussive backdrop to the pre-show chaos. Mothers adjust their children's costumes with trembling fingers, fathers pace near the emergency exits smoking nervous cigarettes, and the scent of cheap cologne mingles with the musty smell of old theatrical curtains that have witnessed decades of amateur performances. In the corner, 9-year-old Tommy Hartwell clutches a worn acoustic guitar that's too big for his small frame. His fingers trace the chord positions he's practiced 1,000 times in his bedroom mirror. The calluses on his fingertips tell the story of months spent learning every note, every word, every breath of Love Me Do. His mother's voice echoes in his memory. Just imagine, Tommy. What if they were really there watching? The irony hangs thick in the air like cigarette smoke. Tommy hums their melody under his breath, unaware that destiny sits 20 feet away, hidden behind costume racks and nervous children. His white shirt, pressed carefully by his mother that morning, already shows sweat stains under his arms. The guitar strap cuts into his shoulder, but he doesn't adjust it. He's afraid any movement might shatter the fragile confidence he's built. A janitor pushes a mop bucket past the Beatles' hiding spot, nodding politely without recognition. The normalcy of the moment strikes them as surreal. Here they are, 4 of the most recognisable faces in Britain, invisible among the controlled chaos of a local talent show. George adjusts his position behind a coat rack, watching Tommy practice the same chord progression over and over, each repetition a prayer whispered to the gods of music. Through the curtain, they can hear the master of ceremonies warming up the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight you'll witness tomorrow's stars." The audience applauds politely. But there's an undercurrent of expectation. Liverpool audiences don't suffer fools gladly, especially not children pretending to be their new heroes. John catches Paul's eye and nods toward Tommy. Something about the boy's concentration, his absolute commitment to getting it right, reminds them of their own early days playing to empty rooms and hostile crowds. The talent show unfolds with mechanical precision, each act polished, predictable, safe. A tap-dancing duo receives generous applause. Twin sisters sing a traditional Irish ballad to warm smiles from the older audience members. The Beatles watch from their hiding spot, but their minds drift to the weight pressing down on their shoulders. John rubs his temples, feeling the familiar throb that's become his constant companion since their meteoric rise. Last year they were still playing the Cavern Club for modest fees. Now every move they make gets dissected by newspapers across Britain. The pressure to follow up Love Me Do with something even bigger gnaws at him constantly. His latest compositions sit unfinished in his notebook, brilliant ideas strangled by the fear that nothing will ever be good enough again. Paul shifts uncomfortably, his stage smile nowhere to be seen in this dim backstage sanctuary. Earlier that day, a reporter asked him about the responsibility of being role models to Britain's youth. The question haunts him now as he watches these children pour their hearts onto the stage. What kind of role models disappear into shadows because they can't handle their own success? His bass lines have been sloppy during rehearsals, his usually perfect harmonies cracking under the weight of expectation. Meanwhile, Tommy stands frozen near the curtain, watching the polished performances with growing dread. His stomach churns as he realizes how different he is from these other acts. They have costumes, choreography, confident smiles. He has only his worn guitar and a song that means everything to him. His father's words from the breakfast table echo, "Don't embarrass us up there, son. The Hartwell name means something in this neighbourhood." The family's financial struggles have become impossible to ignore. His father, a dock worker, hasn't had steady work in 2 months. His mother takes in washing to keep food on the table. This talent show represents more than just a performance. The winner gets £5, enough to pay for groceries for 2 weeks. Tommy practices not because he dreams of fame, but because his family needs hope. George Harrison watches the boy with quiet understanding. He remembers being the youngest, always trying to prove himself worthy of standing beside John and Paul. The boy's youth reminds George of his own desperation to belong, to contribute something meaningful. The worn instrument Tommy holds looks identical to George's first guitar, scarred wood and dreams wrapped in 6 strings. Ringo drums his fingers nervously on his thighs, the rhythm matching Tommy's visible heartbeat. Success hasn't erased Ringo's own memories of performing for crowds that didn't want him there. He sees the same terror in the boy's eyes that he felt joining the Beatles, the knowledge that you're about to expose your soul to people who might reject it completely. The master of ceremonies approaches the microphone with theatrical flourish. And now, ladies and gentlemen, young Tommy Hartwell will perform Love Me Do by those Liverpool lads making quite a name for themselves, the Beatles. A murmur ripples through the audience, some chuckle at the audacity of a child attempting to perform the song that's currently climbing the charts. Others lean forward with curiosity. The Beatles themselves freeze, suddenly understanding that they're about to witness their own creation filtered through the pure, terrifying vulnerability of childhood ambition. Tommy walks onto the stage, guitar in hand, completely unaware that his heroes sit in the darkness, watching every nervous step toward either triumph or devastation. The moment that will change everything arrives faster than anyone expects. The announcer's voice fades as the spotlight finds its target. Tommy moves into the harsh stage lights, his small frame dwarfed by the microphone stand that towers above him. The audience settles into their seats with the kind of anticipatory quiet that precedes either magic or disaster. His fingers find the opening chord of Love Me Do, and for a moment, the sound rings pure and true through St. Mary's scratchy PA system. Love me do, Tommy begins, his voice thin but earnest, carrying the melody with the careful precision of countless bedroom rehearsals. The opening lines flow smoothly, and a few heads in the audience nod approvingly. His mother, sitting in the 3rd row, clasped her hands together in silent prayer. This might actually work. But as Tommy reaches the harmonica break, the part he's practiced 1,000 times in his head, but never quite mastered on the instrument, his voice wavers. Without Paul's actual harmonica to guide him, he attempts to vocalize the melody, creating an awkward, off-key warbling that cuts through the air like fingernails on a chalkboard. A few audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Behind the curtain, Paul winces and takes an unconscious step forward. John's jaw tightens as he watches the boy's confidence begin to crack like ice under pressure. They can see what the audience cannot, the exact moment when doubt creeps into Tommy's eyes, when the weight of 500 staring faces transforms from encouragement into judgment. His melody continues, but now each note carries the tremor of mounting panic. His fingers slip on the fretboard, creating a discordant twang that echoes through the silent room. Someone in the back row snickers, then another. The sound spreads like infection through the audience. First scattered chuckles, then open laughter, finally evolving into the cruel, collective sound of public mockery. "Give it up, lad," shouts a voice from the darkness. "Leave it to the professionals." Tommy's face flames red, but his hands keep moving on the guitar strings. His voice falters on the high notes, making the simple melody sound like a wounded animal crying out in pain. The laughter grows louder, more vicious. Children in the audience point and whisper. Adults shake their heads with embarrassed smiles as if watching a car accident they can't look away from. "He's butchering it," someone calls out. "Those Beatles boys would be rolling in their graves if they were dead." The irony of those words hits the figures behind the curtain like physical blows. George's hands clench into fists. Ringo's gentle face hardens with protective anger. The four exchange a look that needs no words. They've made their decision. Paul moves first, his body instinctively leaning toward the stage as if pulled by invisible strings. Tommy's voice shatters completely on the final verse, but he doesn't stop singing. Tears stream down his cheeks, but he continues playing, continues singing their song with a devotion that transcends technique. His love for the music pours out raw and unfiltered, even as his world crumbles around him. The guitar becomes his shield, the melody his last refuge against the storm of derision washing over him. John Lennon, who built his reputation on sharp wit and cutting remarks, feels something crack inside his chest. This isn't entertainment anymore, it's execution. They're watching a child's dream being murdered in public, and the murder weapon is their own creation. The master of ceremonies starts toward the stage, ready to end the boy's suffering, but Tommy raises his head and pushes through the final chorus with desperate determination. His voice, broken and raw, somehow finds truth in the devastation. The words "love me do" become a plea not for romance, but for basic human kindness, for someone, anyone, to see past the failure to the heart beneath. In the wings, the young men who've conquered the world stand frozen, watching their song transformed from pop hit into prayer, from entertainment into an act of pure, vulnerable courage that shames every comfortable soul in the room. When Tommy's final broken chord fades away, the silence stretches like eternity. The boy stands frozen at the microphone, tears streaming down his face, his small chest heaving with the effort of not collapsing completely. The audience sits in uncomfortable quiet. Their laughter died away, replaced by the hollow shame that follows cruelty. Some stare at their hands, others glance toward the exits. Then, cutting through the suffocating silence, a figure emerges from the shadow stage left into the harsh stage lights. John Lennon strides forward first, his leather jacket catching the spotlight as he moves with quiet purpose toward the shaking boy. The audience's collective gasp ripples through St. Mary's like wind through wheat. A woman in the front row drops her program. Children's mouths fall open in disbelief. Paul follows, then George, then Ringo, four silhouettes materializing from darkness like guardian angels summoned by genuine need. They don't announce themselves or acknowledge the audience's shock. Their focus remains entirely on Tommy, who blinks up at them through his tears as if witnessing a miracle. "All right there, lad," John asks quietly, his voice stripped of its usual sarcasm, carrying only gentle concern. He doesn't touch the boy, understanding that Tommy's dignity has already been damaged enough. Instead, he simply stands beside him, a presence that says, "You're not alone anymore." Paul moves to Tommy's other side and without a word begins humming the opening bars of Love Me Do, not the polished studio version, but something softer, more intimate, like a lullaby. George positions himself behind Tommy, his hands hovering near the boy's shoulders in a gesture of protection. Ringo finds his place to the left, nodding encouragement with the patient smile that's comforted nervous musicians in countless recording sessions. "Mind if we help you finish it properly?" Paul whispers to Tommy, who nods mutely, unable to speak but gripping his worn guitar with renewed determination. They begin again, together this time. His voice, still shaking but now supported by Paul's harmonies, finds its way back to the melody. John doesn't sing. Instead, he provides the harmonica line with his voice, filling the gaps where Tommy struggled before. George adds subtle backing vocals while Ringo keeps time with gentle finger snaps that guide Tommy's rhythm back to steadiness. The song transforms. What was broken becomes whole. What was mockery becomes sacred. The audience sits transfixed as they witness Love Me Do performed not as entertainment, but as an act of profound kindness. The boy's singing grows stronger with each verse, supported by the very people who created the song he loves so desperately. This isn't about technical perfection. The Beatles, who could easily overshadow the boy with their talent, instead become his foundation, lifting him up rather than taking over. They follow his lead, matching his tempo, complementing his interpretation rather than correcting it. In this moment, they're not global superstars. their 4 older brothers helping their younger sibling find his voice. As the final notes fade, the silence returns, but it's transformed. This isn't the uncomfortable quiet of embarrassment, but the reverent hush that follows something holy. Tommy looks up at John, Paul, George and Ringo with a gaze that shines not with tears of shame, but with the kind of joy that changes a person forever. The audience explodes in applause, not the polite clapping they offered earlier acts, but thunderous, sustained ovation that seems to shake the building's foundation. People rise to their feet, cheering not just for the Beatles, but for the courage they've witnessed, the kindness they've been privileged to see. But the Beatles don't acknowledge the crowd. Paul ruffles Tommy's hair. John adjusts the boy's guitar strap with brotherly care. George gives him an encouraging nod. Ringo offers a gentle high five that Tommy accepts with a grin that could power the entire city of Liverpool. They slip away as quietly as they came, leaving Tommy alone on stage to accept the adoration he's earned. As the curtain falls, the boy stands taller. His guitar no longer a burden but a badge of honour. The Beatles have given him more than just musical support. They've shown him that dreams don't die from failure, but from giving up. In the wings, watching Tommy bow to his standing ovation, 4 young men smile with the satisfaction that comes from using their power not for personal gain, but for pure, uncomplicated good. They've remembered why they fell in love with music in the first place, not for fame or fortune, but for moments exactly like this one.